It is the second fatal stabbing at the Liliha housing complex within the last 5 months.
This afternoon, children played and rode their bicycles over blood-stained sidewalks at Mayor Wright housing. It is where a large brawl ended with one man fatally stabbed and 3 others injured.
There had to have been about 75 to 100 people out here, and the crowd just went crazy. Everyone was fighting. There were women, men, just fighting.
Aloha everybody, my name is Ian, and right now we're in my home of Mayor Wright's housing. My grandmother moved in here over 50 years ago. She is a local Chinese Hawaiian woman that was born on Oahu, and my grandmother raised 5 children here, including my mother, and I was raised here from 1982 until now. This has been my home for a very long time. And today, I'm going to give you guys a never before seen in-depth look of Mayor Wright's housing and a tour around the neighborhood by me. So please enjoy and let's go.
Tonight, residents living in a state-funded housing complex say they're fed up with the living conditions.
And they plan to take their frustrations to the streets. KITV4's Shane Enright met with tenants tonight and joins us with more. Shane?
Well, tenants from Mayor Wright housing are planning a peaceful protest tomorrow. They hope to draw attention to the lack of a basic service that most of us wouldn't want to live without. The state operates Mayor Wright housing in Kalihi, providing low rent to tenants living in the 364 units. Over the years, tenants say they've watched their living conditions deteriorate. But it is the lack of hot water for the last 3 years that is causing the residents' blood to boil.
And the strategy that we have doesn't necessarily quell those frustrations. But what it does do is it gives, I still have the money.
They keep saying that we're working on it, we're working. The other side of their response is we don't have no money.
I still have the money.
The history of Mayor Wright's housing actually goes back to Mayor Wright, and he was the mayor of Honolulu from I believe it was 1931 to 1938. And after 10 years after he passed away, Mayor Wrights began construction in about 1953. So this place was started to get built before Hawaii was a state. And not long after that, my grandmother moved in, because my grandmother grew up what people would consider low class income. She didn't work much. She had 5 kids, and this was all she could afford at the time. So Mayor Wright's housing is what's known to be considered low-income housing. A lot of people under Section 8 live here, and there's a lot of controversy and a lot of problems, as there usually is with public housing systems. So back here, this is behind my unit here, my grandmother's unit, and this is now what's considered to be the back porch. But this was actually originally the front porch. It was the front of the unit. So people would enter through here, and then the other side was the back door. But they changed it, and they renovated it, and they walled this up, and this became the back porch. This place has not had very many renovations. It has been funded to get renovated many times. There's been a few problems with that. But it was renovated in 1984. It got a new paint job and they fixed a few things here and there. It was updated again in the late 90s, early 2000s with a fence going around the perimeter of the outside, which I will show you soon. So like I said, my grandma's been living here actually over 60 years and there hasn't been very much renovation, even though the housing supposedly gets over $5 million annually. But my original window, the metal rotted out. It rusted and rotted out of the place and the window fell out. So the housing came and instead of replacing the window, they just put a board on the window, like a piece of wood. This is just wood. And it's been like that and they never replaced it. So I don't have a window, I have a piece of wood blocking my window. But that's my point, is that when they do these searches, these inspections, they're not inspecting the quality of the buildings, because most of the buildings are substandard. And actually when my grandmother and I no longer are in this unit, they're most likely just going to board it up and not re-rent it at all, because they're not going to want to spend the money to renovate it and re-rent it, because they don't spend the money, they're using it for something else. And a lot of the units here, that once people move out, they just board them up. So my suspicion is that when this unit is empty, it's going to be boarded up, and eventually they're going to board up all the units, and that'll be one of their ways to condemn this place and break it down. But like I said, if they cared about the quality of the building for the inspections, and these types of issues would be fixed. But what they're really doing is they're just creating excuses for illegal search and seizure. And like if you understand, like the police, when the police want to search your house, they need a warrant before they come in and look, or they need just cause. They're going to look for guns, drugs, weapons, and money. Then the police need a warrant. But for the public housing system, for them to bypass that legal system or needing a warrant, they create what's called inspection. So they're not inspecting the building, they're just looking for drugs, guns, and money. That's all they're looking for. They want to see every single one of these tenants. They want to see who has guns, they want to see who has drugs, and they want to see who has money. And they could care less about the pipes, they could care less about the windows, the cracks in the walls, the cracks in the ceilings, because the whole place is falling apart. But they annually do illegal search and seizure. And they use under the pretense of annual inspection. But if the tenants here knew more about their civil rights and their laws, pretty much probably everybody in this housing would be able to sue, because there's just no excuse. And you know, they hire a private security here, but I actually had neighbors that just recently, like a month ago, got robbed. The kids came in through their back porch at 4 a.m. in the morning, walked around while the couple was asleep on their house, and robbed their house, and then threw everything over the wall. And so really, like, what is the security guards doing really? And you know, who really cares about the safety of these people? They don't. It's just it's basically what it really is a prison camp. It's a legalized prison camp, and it's a legalized refugee camp where they can bring in minorities and people from Micronesia or Polynesia or Hawaiians or Southeast Asia, and they can house them in a type of refugee camp that's substandard, and then they can do it under legal pretenses by using words like housing and inspection and, you know, security and this and that. But it's just really just a sad situation. So I hope the people watching this get wise to it. And if you live in a situation like this, you know, get some good legal representation, because you could easily win a case.
A legal advocacy group is suing the state, claiming it has allowed unsanitary conditions to linger at one of Hawaii's largest low-income housing complexes. Residents of Mayor Wright housing in Kalihi have been complaining about no hot water and other problems for years.
Victor Geminiani of the Lawyers for Equal Justice represents Mayor Wright residents. He says the state has failed to spend the money to provide decent living conditions.
There are over $350 million in repairs that are pent up that have to be made in the system, and yet the legislature appropriates $10 or $15 million for repairs each year. We're falling farther and farther and farther behind.
Gemignani says the 35 housing units are deteriorating. They are infested with rats, roaches, and bed bugs. There are cracked windows and streetlights, not enough dumpsters, and worst of all, a lack of consistent hot running water.
Except on the most sunny of days, the units don't get any hot water. And even on the sunny days, they get hot water only between, we'll say, noon and 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So at night, kids have to bathe in cold water.
Right here in the middle of the housing area lies a makeshift playground set aside for the children. But danger lurks just 10 yards away as exposed wires from this light pole remain accessible. Another issue residents face is the lack of safety.
This is the fence that surrounds the perimeter of the housing. The housing actually houses between 300 people at any given time. But originally there was a regular chain link fence that went around. A lot of people would cut it, and there were many openings to the street behind me. All 4 corners, all 4 streets, there were many openings. And on the other side of this fence is a street called Pua Lane. So originally people would be able to leave from many different exits, and you can see the sidewalk here. It actually went right out onto the Pua Lane street sidewalk, because this was a gate, a fenced opening, and it was open all the way until the late 1990s, early 2000s. A lot of people have complained and said that this appearance is a lot like a prison, and if there was ever a disaster, an emergency, a crisis, or a fire, a lot of the elderly or handicapped people wouldn't be able to evacuate to the sidewalk or leave, because now there's only 2 entrances that are monitored by private security guards on Pua Lane and King Street. But to walk there is a little bit far and may take a few minutes, especially for elderly or handicapped people. Now also, I want you guys to notice that the parking lot here has a lot of open parking spaces. You can see that even though this is a full housing with over 300 people who all mostly have cars and vehicles, a lot of the parking stalls are empty, and this is a Sunday. And originally, when my grandma moved in, and even in the 80s and early 90s, the policy was that by default, anybody who had a unit and anybody who was paying rent was entitled to get at least 1 parking stall mandatory. It was given with the rent. So it didn't matter if you had a car or not. If you paid rent and you lived in a unit, your name was on the lease, you had a designated parking stall, and you could park whatever vehicle you wanted in there, whether it be yours or not, or a visitor. So if you had your cousin or your uncle or your friend come over, they could park in your parking stall and there would be no problem. That all changed when they promoted the person that was in charge of the parking lot. They promoted that person to the manager, the manager of this housing. And when they did that, that person took away a lot of people's parking stalls under strict regulations. And that person is now the current manager. And because of it, a lot of people that actually live here in these units are now forced to park on the street behind me on Pua Lane. So a lot of these cars that you see here actually belong to the people that are tenants in here, but because of the fact that their parking stalls were taken away, they have to park on the street parking, where there's a lot of vulnerability to break-ins, crimes, and getting their vehicles stolen. Now, the person that did this parking manager, who is now the manager, is not a local person. They're not from Hawaii, they're not Hawaiian. They're from the mainland, and a lot of these public housing systems are run by people who are not local and don't live here and wouldn't live here. They're essentially managing buildings that they themselves would not live in or park their own vehicles at. Up here you can see some of the parking lot rules and regulations right here. And also these light poles were replaced. These were ordinary street lamps, but now they're actually smart lamps, and they have 5G technology in them, and they have smart LED lights, which some people say actually have health problems and health effects.
For public housing, the state may target fancy car drivers as a sign of excess.
There's Mercedes-Benzes there, there's Escalade, vans. There are nice cars in there. You see BMWs.
When we went to look, there were 2 brand new cars at Mayor Wright. One belonged to a state employee working there, and the other was just driven over on a lunch break by a resident employed at a car lot. Another resident's SUV stood out.
Hey, that one at the end, that's kind of nice. Should that person, if they can afford a car like that, should they be able to live here?
Yeah.
Why?
We didn't happen to see many. Were we just there at the wrong time?
I used to park my car here, but a lot of the neighborhood kids are, unsupervised and rascally, and sometimes the kids would climb on other people's cars, sit on my hood, throw rocks at my car, and one time they even pushed my car backwards, and it hit another car and broke my tail light. That's a common problem in these neighborhoods. A lot of these children coming from low-income families and first-generation immigrants get neglected, unsupervised, and kind of just run around wild in the parking lot. And I understand it because I was one of them. But this is where I park now, and you can see here that the kids ripped off my gas cap. I've had my tires slashed a few times, and even over here, my tire was actually stabbed and flat. I had to get it towed just recently. Pretty much every car I've ever had while living here, including a motorcycle, was tampered with. I had my white Honda out there broken into, stolen. I had my windows smashed out on my Dodge, and I had another black Honda that was actually stolen right there off the street. And there's been a lot of problems with vehicles here. And the ironic thing is that even though the manager is a parking manager and pays private security, the vehicles here are still victimized, and the private security has done nothing to protect my vehicles personally. I've talked to a few other tenants that have also complained about such issues.
Upset over neighborhood kids hitting his vehicle. Bobby Golden says a verbal argument escalated into a physical altercation.
Okay, so everybody that lives here has to get a parking pass or a parking sticker, and you have to put it on your window, which is fine, which is normal. But like I said, the manager here actually lets an independent tow truck company come in whenever they want, 24/7, all hours of the day and night, and tow whoever they want. So, for example, like even though I had this parking sticker, tow truck can come in and decide that I'm not parked straight enough in my stall, or maybe not even see my sticker and make a mistake. And if they want to, they can tow my car right out of my stall. They can tow anybody they want for whatever reason they want. And it's actually happened to me. Even though I live here and I've actually had proper parking requirements, I've been towed out of my own stall multiple times. And there's nothing that you can do about it. I've had to pay. I've been towed over like 10 times. I've had to pay over thousands of dollars. The tow truck company won't drop your truck. You got to go down to the tow truck company, pay like $150 to $200 to get your car released. It's pretty criminal, but it's because the management and the tow truck company have like a deal. And this is the only place I've lived in my life. I've never lived anywhere else where the management allows a tow truck to tow the people that actually live here. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of a tow truck company being allowed to tow whoever they want. And furthermore, towing the people that live here. I've never been towed out of someplace I've lived before. So I think that that's really bad management. And as you can see, like, most people aren't parked in here. The parking lot is very empty throughout the day. So parking is not a problem. And quite frankly, anywhere else you live, if you wanted to park your car in your stall however you want, I mean, it would be permitted. But that's the thing about the tow truck company and the management, is that it's caused a lot of problem for residents here, and it's very unfair because I've actually seen people come in without proper stickers and just park by the garbage can, park however they want, and they never got towed. So some people that live here get towed, but then other people that are supposed to get towed don't get towed, and that's a problem. Okay, right here in my hand I have two devices. One is a radio frequency meter that tests radio frequencies and radiation, and the other one is a electromagnetic field detector and test electromagnetic field radiation. I'm going to put down the microphone and I'm going to step away from the camera so that these devices don't interfere with the microphone and the phone. And I'm going to then read these meters here, and then I'm going to come back and show you the readouts. Okay, so I'm going to take this off. So what you can see here is that the radio frequency readings, especially for max, are well over the normal health levels at 8,000. And these radio frequencies are coming out of this area consistently. And now I'm going to use the electromagnetic field detector. So here, this electromagnetic field detector tests in milligauss, and you can see it's 90 degrees out today. It's very hot. But standing near the meters, it reads out 88.1 milligauss, which the normal human safety level is 4 milligauss. So it's very, very high. And children playing in the area, people walking by it, and people that live on the other side of the wall are exposed to these illegally high levels of radiation according to the standard health regulations. Guys, so a lot of things about the housing. Number one is you might notice a lot of chickens, and the reason why is because sometime during I think what people said is Hurricane Iniki in the 90s, it busted loose a lot of chickens on Kauai. I don't really know how that affected the island of Oahu, but while I was growing up, there were no chickens around, and even when I was going to McKinney High School, there were no chickens around. This is something that occurred within the last 15 years, but now the neighborhood's completely filled with chickens, and some people have to put fences on their back porches so the chickens don't come in. A lot of kids play with them, chase them around, and also some people like to make them fight and gamble on it. On top of the units are hot water heaters and solar panels, and that's how a lot of people get hot water. But in less than 10 years ago, there's been a lot of complaints that people got their water shut off, or that they were only getting cold water. And one elderly woman in particular was only getting cold water and no hot water for over a week. And she was her testimony was able to contribute to a bigger class action lawsuit. But I'll talk more about that later. So actually, you'll also see around a lot of housings have clothesline, and that's because a lot of the people here don't have any they have washing machines, but they don't have dryers, and there's no nearby laundromat. So a lot of the people around here still have to dry their clothes outdoors and hang them on the line, like old-fashioned way. So doing laundry is a problem too, and having something as simple as a laundromat or even a drying machine is something kind of like a luxury to some of the people that live here. We're coming up to another place right here that's called, well, it was a library for the kids, but this graffiti piece was made by 808urban.com. His name is Prime. He's a local Hawaiian graffiti artist, and he helped make this graffiti piece that says community pride. It's been here for over 15 years actually, and I'm not sure about the operation of this particular unit today, but this graffiti piece has lasted for quite some time. It's the only graffiti piece in this neighborhood actually, and even though this neighborhood is in the process of being gentrified, it doesn't have a lot of the fancy or modern art murals or art displays that you see in other upscale parts of developing downtown Honolulu. And I can go into that a little bit more later as well. But coming up is where the mailboxes are. The mailboxes used to be right here. All the mailboxes, each building had its own mailbox, and then people could come out and check the mail. But now they took down all the mailboxes, and they put all the mailboxes in one area. And I'm gonna go check my mail right now, so you can come with me. Right here in the ground, you'll see it etched. It says MWH for Mayor Wright's Housing, and some of the OGs get that tatted on their arms, and they get the tattoo MWH to represent where they came from. A lot of the people, because it's low-income housing, and it's pretty much an impoverished neighborhood. My family has been here 3 generations, my grandmother, my mother, and me. And what ends up happening is a lot of the people raised here that live here get pushed into criminal activity just to make ends meet, and which involves a lot of crime, drug dealing, and gang activity. Actually, this housing for a long time was known as a red neighborhood, or a neighborhood for Bloods. Now, I'm not saying that that has any affiliation with the LA faction of the Bloods. And if people look more into that deeply, the leaders of these organized crimes and leaders of these organized gangs actually have lots of roots in Freemasonry. So red versus blue is actually an old concept that goes to some secret societies. So sometimes the leaders of these colored gangs actually have very high up financiers and bosses that are giving them instructions on how to be organized crime. It's very convoluted, and I'm not going to get into all the details right at this second, but I just want to make it clear that even though my family did partake in criminal activity during the 80s, and I have a lot of knowledge growing up here and a lot of friends, I myself am not a drug dealer. I've never sold drugs, and I want to make that clear because I'm putting this on video. And also, I was fortunate enough to, for the most part, avoid any type of gang activity or be in the middle of of that for the most part. I tried my best as a youth to try to avoid joining a gang. I know it's hard for a lot of kids, and they supplement street gangs for like family because they come from broken families, and I understand, but I tried my best because I knew, watching my family and watching my parents, that if I was to get caught up in that type of a thing, I probably wouldn't have a good chance of living very long. So I do have a lot of friends though, and a lot of the people I grew up with ended up either dead or in jail. Some of them went on to be successful, and I had a friend join the military, but for the most part, I tried to stay out of the criminal activity, which is why I'm able to make this video today. Behind me is supposed to be the playground, but as you can see, it's surrounded by an 8-foot tall fence, and it's actually locked up. So the kids actually play around it. They don't play inside of it. And that's kind of sad, but I suspect that this playground is not intended to be used as a playground. It would be a useful place to harbor or shelter people in a lockdown scenario. But this is a Sunday, and oftentimes I drive by, I hardly ever see the playground actually open or being utilized, which leads the kids to be playing in the streets a lot. Now, I did mention that this is a supposedly like a red neighborhood, but there is another neighborhood I'm not going to mention that claims blue, and sometimes within the last 30 years there has been children and teenagers and young adults that get involved in neighborhood rivalries. And yeah, luckily I was able to avoid that. You know, it's hard to find a balance between being prideful of your neighborhood, but at the same time not getting caught up in dramatics and politics. So, you know, it's hard to find a good balance of not telling people too much information that they can use against you, but at the same time trying not to be too embarrassed about where you live. So there's a lot of challenges for people, old and young, living here. And back in the day when this place first was established, like when my grandmother moved in, there was a lot of native Hawaiians, local Polynesians, Samoan, Tongan, and Southeast Asian, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Chinese population. Later on, a lot of those families moved out or passed away. My grandmother was one of the oldest living tenants at the age of 93. But a lot of her neighbors passed away. During that time, these yards were very full of plants and tea leaves and trees and bushes and hibiscus, but the housing made more strict regulations and rules, and now most people aren't allowed to have gardens. And also the housing comes and cuts everybody's lawn. During about 98, the late 90s and through the rest of the 2000s, this neighborhood went from Hawaiian, Samoan, Tongan, Vietnamese, Asian, Chinese, to becoming now today is 2021 is a predominantly Micronesian neighborhood. Most of the tenants here are actually first generation and now second generation Micronesians. And that's because in Micronesia, the United States military used a lot of their land for missiles, silos, submarine bases, and bomb testing. So the United States government actually has a treaty and a contract, and they bring all of the Micronesian refugees and displaced Micronesians here to Oahu as a supplement. And a lot of these people are coming from basically like as a third world country and coming into first world country for the first time. So they don't have a lot of knowledge of rules and regulations, but you know, that's a challenge for any immigrants. And the process has been slow and learning, but You know, it's just people just trying to make a living like the rest of us did in very meager surroundings. And so with that being said, I'm gonna take you guys out to the street, out on good old Pua Lane. Let's go. So long, Pua Lane. Aloha everybody, we're on the infamous Pua Lane, and there's actually a song about it. It's called Bye Bye Pua Lane by Brother Noland. I'll put the little information at the bottom of the screen. You guys can look up that song. I can't sing it or play it because of copyrights, but there's actually a song about this street, Pua Lane, P-U-A-L-A-N-E. I used to have to walk up and down this street my whole entire life, and especially when I was going to school at Likelike School. And like I said, I was born and raised here, but my mother and my grandmother, my grandma's and my mom's family being local, native Chinese and Hawaiian, my father was from the mainland. So my mother's side of the family is Chinese Hawaiian, but my father is Caucasian, not born in Hawaii. But I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu, and I am a little bit part Native Hawaiian. But as a kid growing up, a lot of the children out here were very prejudiced and racist towards me. I got bullied a lot, and I used to get chased down this street when I was a little kid because most of the kids actually in this neighborhood are, like I said, were at the time like Tongan, Samoan, and Polynesian and Asian. And I wasn't. I was probably the only one in the neighborhood that wasn't. I had a lot of friends growing up. I had a lot of kids that were my friends, but I did have a lot of instances of being bullied. A lot of drug dealing used to go on this street, and cars get stolen, broken into on this street a lot. You can see all the time trash and broken glass of smashed windows. And sometimes people know that cars get stolen here. It has a reputation, so if somebody has a car that they don't want anymore, they'll actually bring their car here to get broken into and stolen. I've walked down this street before, and back in the 80s and the 90s it was actually a lot worse because there was open drug dealing. That was before there was lots of cameras and surveillance like there is now. And I mean, I've walked down the street, I've seen people brandishing pistols and guns out in the open. And like I said, there's a lot of gang activity, but if you want to survive, you got to try your best to stay out of it. You know, I did have a lot of good friends growing up, but it was a mixture. I had some friends that were, you know, willing to play with me. You know, we were rascals, but then I had other friends that their parents didn't want them to play with me. And even now today, when I walk around the neighborhood, even though I was born and raised in this neighborhood, because it's a lot of Micronesian people here, some people think that I'm not even local or that I'm not even from this neighborhood, which is ironic because you know, a lot of them aren't from here, a lot of them aren't born here, a lot of them came here first generation, a lot of them are from other places, you know, from Asia, Southeast Asia, or even like I said, Micronesia. So it's kind of ironic that I have to prove that I'm from here, and I'm actually more local than a lot of the people here. But you know, that's the way it is. There's a lot of racism in Hawaii, especially towards what people think are Caucasian or Haole people. Even though I was born here, I still get lumped into that category a lot. Right now we're at the local gas station. It's called Shell gas station. And interestingly enough, the address here is 666, right where I'm standing. This gas station's been here since I was a kid, and it's been robbed so many times. It's had different owners over the years, but that's the way it is. Even me, when I was a kid, I've shoplifted from over here but it was because it wasn't because I was trying to be bad or anything. It was just because I grew up from a broken household, and while my parents were out, while our parents were out, you know, selling drugs and doing crimes, we were neglected and left home alone, so we didn't have a lot to eat. So my little cousin and I would come in here and like steal candy and stuff, because we didn't have dinner a lot of the time. One time when I was a kid, while I was being bullied a lot, the kids chased me down Pua Lane and then stole the slippers off my feet and then threw me in that dumpster. I tried to climb on the wall to get away, and they jumped on the wall with me, and they grabbed me by my arms and my legs, and they threw me in the dumpster. And I went home and told my grandmother. She was afraid to do anything about it because she didn't want to create friction with the neighbors or the housing. It was rough times back then, and I got chased home a few times. I'd just be walking home from school with my backpack on Pua Lane, and then kids would be sitting on the cars and they'd say, "There he is, there's that Howley kid," and they'd jump and they'd chase me home. But luckily, as an adult, you know, like I don't have that really happen to me anymore. I kind of got to a point where nobody really bothers me, you know, knock on wood, cross my fingers. I pretty much, you know, I'm accustomed to the way things are here, learn to stand up for myself. And actually one time recently, I was working in downtown. I forgot my keys at my job. I had to come back at about 12 o'clock at night. And some little teenage kid was across the street, and he was asking me for money, and I said I didn't have any money. And then he was like, "You know what? F you, you stupid Howley." And then Howley means Caucasian. That's what the word people use for Caucasians in Hawaii is they call them Howley. It's kind of like a derogatory term. It's like it's considered a negative term. But I kind of got a little bit upset, and I said, "You know what? This is my neighborhood." And that kid got on his bike, he rode across the street, and he tried to fight me in this parking lot like 12 o'clock in the morning. I felt bad because he didn't look like he was more than I don't know, 15 years old, 16 years old, and I'm a grown man. I don't want to hurt anybody. But he was in my face, and just then about 5 of my neighbors came around the corner. They were actually all Micronesian, and they actually stuck up for me and said, "Hey, this is my neighbor." And the kid ran away. So that was a time when my neighbors actually vouched for me and stuck up for me. So it's important to avoid racism because I've been a victim of it, and a lot of people are racist and prejudiced towards Micronesians, but I've had Micronesian people be very nice to me on certain occasions, especially my neighbors. You know, there's a lot of break-ins around this neighborhood, there's a lot of stolen cars, and it's not so much a race, but it's more just like what people do to survive when they're put into these types of situations. So neighborhoods like Mayor Wright's housing, among others, are actually very useful to organized crime and criminal underground drug dealing and activity. When Yakuzas and organized crime, Chinese triads, and it goes very high. It goes back to millionaires and banks and billionaires. I'm not going to name specific names or specific gangs, but the drugs get imported. Methamphetamine is a big problem, and like all public housing systems, the public housing itself is used to bring the drugs and then distribute it throughout the city. And you have people high up in organized crime and business transporting and then giving these drugs to inner city youth and inner city lower level street gangs. Those lower level city youth and street gangs then distribute those drugs, so that if anybody gets caught or arrested, the only people getting arrested are the local drug dealers and drug addicts, and not the actual people that are trafficking the products on a daily basis. Like I said, methamphetamine is a big problem, and the reason why it comes from places like the Yakuza in Japan is because back in World War II, the Nazi Germans developed methamphetamine as a super soldier drug, because they wanted a drug that would make people fearless, not sleep, and alert. And so they would give the Nazi soldiers methamphetamine that would allow them to stay awake all night, fly planes all night, and be wide awake, holding guns, not be fearless, charge over into enemy territory. So when the Germans were given methamphetamine, they were able to invade Poland. It was very effective. And the drug has been in use ever since. The Nazis gave it to the Japanese. The Japanese gave it to their kamikaze fighter pilot, bomb pilots. The young kids in Japan would take methamphetamine, they'd stay awake all night on day, fly their planes over the Pacific, and then were brainwashed into being told that they would sacrifice themselves for God, and they would be high on meth and crash their plane. 17 years old, 18 years old kids crashing their planes and suiciding themselves in World War II because of methamphetamine. So now we have in Hawaii, in modern day Hawaii, we have a lot of average citizens and people and youth and women and children that are on methamphetamine, which was intended to be a super soldier drug. And so you can see what it does to soldiers, then you will start to understand what it does to normal people. That's why they stay up all night, they develop problems. A lot of people think homeless people have mental problems, but they're actually high on methamphetamine. And the reason why it's given to the public is because it gets them high fast, it's cheap, it turns a huge profit, and it helps destabilize the area to create room for gentrification. Once they can break down the neighborhood, the banks can then buy the land cheap and build high rises and condominiums. Behind me is one of many game rooms that surround the area. It's where people go to get meth. And the police are aware of it, but like I said, the profit and the whole scheme of things go very high. Like I said, behind me is a game room, and what a game room is, it's an illegal gambling room. And this neighborhood is surrounded, Honolulu is surrounded by many, because gambling is officially illegal, but these game rooms exist for two purposes. Number one, gambling, but most importantly, it's a place where the meth can be distributed. So a lot of people who gamble also stay awake and do methamphetamine or come to these game rooms just to get the product. And like I said, the police are aware of it, but they don't get shut down because the profit is going right back to the city ultimately for gentrification. And there's a lot of high-level people in on it. So that's all I'm going to be careful and say about that right now. Right behind me is Likelike Elementary School, named after Princess Likelike. And this is where I went when I was a kid for kindergarten, first grade, second grade. But it's about a block away from Mayor Wright's housing, and a lot of the kids that live in Mayor Wright's attend this school or did attend this school. It's a pandemic currently right now in Hawaii, so I'm not sure if the little kids are still in school, but this is where I went. To the right of me is a Samoan church. The Samoan church has been there for a long time as well, and it's ironic that this area, even though it's a high crime area, because of gentrification, it has a lot of liquor stores, gas station liquor stores to provide alcohol and smoking paraphernalia. It has a lot of illegal gambling rooms and places where they can distribute meth. It also has a lot of churches, surrounded by many churches. And back in the day, in the 90s, there was about 5 different pawn shops around the neighborhood, so people could rob people, steal things, and then go to the pawn shops and sell them, get money to buy the drugs. So all in one block, there was pawn stores, gambling houses, churches, and liquor stores. Basically everything you need for gentrification. So it's a very well planned out, thought out, textbook, well-oiled machine. And over just a few generations, what the intent is to, like I said, break down the neighborhood and build more high-rises like they did in Kaka'ako, eventually going down to the west side of the island where they're now building a rail. They want to eventually gentrify the whole coastline, generation by generation. And going to this school, I guess a funny little story is I actually used to, that behind me right there is the cafeteria, or it was the cafeteria, and that blue door back there. And one day I was so hungry and I was constantly starving. There was a milk delivery, and there was a milk delivery truck. It was delivering milk, and I remember climbing over this fence and going and stealing milk. When the guy was pushing the milk on the door, I waited till he went in, and then I grabbed a whole case of milk and I ran off with it and got bloated on milk because I was so hungry. But those are the types of things that the kids in this neighborhood do typically. So the important thing to say is that, you know, I have hope here that even though, you know, there's been lots of scandals, like millions of dollars have been given to upscale and renovate the units in Mayor Wright's housing, the people that worked in the office in the 90s actually embezzled millions of those dollars, which is why many of the units never got the walls fixed, the paint fixed, the windows fixed, all the problems, the plumbing were never fixed, because every time money goes into the public housing system, the corrupt criminal people that work in that housing system then embezzle the money or take it away. And recently, there's been a few offers for $1 billion construction to redevelop the area, which is the point, is gentrification. 2 offers have been turned down so far. I think what's happening is because of the pandemic, they're waiting for a more expensive offer. They're waiting for the rail. They're waiting to push more tenants out of Mayor Wright's housing. Like I said, they're waiting for the pandemic to finish. And now they could actually use the housing as a temporary quarantine zone in a state of emergency if they ever needed to. But I think that in the future, this place will actually be a better place. The kids going to school here and going to Churchill won't have to deal with the gambling rooms, especially because Oahu now is trying to build a casino for more money laundering. But what that's going to do is that's going to slowly force the police to shut down all of the gambling rooms. So as you see gambling legalized and casinos being built, you're going to see a lot of the illegal gambling rooms being shut down slowly, year by year. But I do have hope for this area, and I do want to keep things on a positive note. Right now I'm standing in front of Palama Settlement. You can see the name above my head. It's a Sunday, it's closed. Palama Settlement has been around since before I was a kid, and it's actually where I learned to swim. I learned to swim here, and during the summertime they had a program called Summer Fun, and it was a supplement for summer school. So a lot of the kids in the neighborhood and surrounding areas enrolled their children into the Summer Fun program here at Palama Settlement. And during the entire summer, kids would come here from morning to night as a way to kind of give their parents a little rest and relaxation so that they could continue working or have time to their own over the summer. It gave the neighborhood kids a place to play and do activities like basketball, even recent times dance classes, swimming, and then we would go on excursions and field trips. So it was considered a youth center, and a lot of people have good memories here, but currently as it is, I don't believe children or the way it was functioning back in the 80s and 90s is the way it's functioning now, which is a shame, because like I said, this area is filled with a lot of drugs and high crime and risk for youth. So it's good to have youth centers and places where kids can play safely. And like I said, to be clear, like, I don't personally participate, advocate, or promote any type of illegal drug use myself. I believe in a clean, sober, honest living lifestyle. So anybody with kids out there or that were kids themselves, I want you guys to take note that not everybody in the ghetto is just like a helpless, hopeless, homeless drug addict. And like I said, I do have hopes for the future. Like many slums and ghettos and housing projects, there's lots of, like, you know, murders and crime and stuff. And actually right behind me right here on this ledge, right above to where I'm pointing, in the 90s, there was a police shot and killed some people from this building. They were what the news said is they were dealing drugs and running drugs out of the house. And what happens a lot of the time, like I said, is that most of the crime is coming from the top down. So it's coming from millionaires, billionaires, banks, import, and law, crooked, and there's a lot of corruption in the Hawaii state government. So law enforcement is aware, and sometimes the corrupt side of law enforcement is actually running and monitoring these drug trafficking and trades. So what happens sometimes is when they want to get rid of somebody, then they'll pull the plug on them and then, exterminate them, execute them. Or what happens sometimes is that an independent street dealer or entrepreneur that's not attached to the government system, that's not attached to the corruption or the crooked side of law enforcement, they'll be completely independent and they'll try to manufacture and distribute their own drugs. They'll often be the first people to get arrested and killed or jailed because they're actually competition to the organized illegal drug trade. And there is no war on drugs because it's the biggest economy in the United States, and so the illegal drug trade actually pays for a lot of things in the government. And anybody that's selling drugs that's not a part of that system is just simply considered rival business, and sometimes they get executed, which happens a lot.
Some residents said tonight they are afraid.
Oh, very much, very much.
Why? How so?
Well, there's been a lot of killings here so far, yeah? So, I mean, it's in the news all the time, so we want to find out what the new director has to offer us.
Some residents said the new security rules might go too far.
I think that's unnecessary to me because people shouldn't be treated like, I guess, prisoners.
And some make the point most residents are good, friendly people.
It's just different people who makes the community look bad. It's not everybody. Why should everybody get punished for someone else's, I don't know. Why make it hard for, the rest of us?
In numbering them, he said numbers give it the feel of a cell block.
This is not something that we think it's okay, but what I'm saying is that the help of the residents will be crucial. If we put fences all over, it's going to feel like jail.
Well, I hope you guys found my little tour informative, and hope you liked it. I know I don't want to end on any negative note, but once again, we're ending the tour back where I started, at the front of my grandmother's house. And actually right where I'm standing, I think it was 2011, there was a knife skirmish, and a man was killed here on my grandma's front lawn.
It is the second fatal stabbing at the Liliha housing complex within the last 5 months.
This afternoon, children played and rode their bicycles over blood-stained sidewalks at Mayor Wright housing. It is where a large brawl ended with one man fatally stabbed and 3 others injured.
There had to have been about 75 to 100 people out here, and the crowd just went crazy. Everyone was fighting. There were women, men, just fighting.
Residents say they often fear for their safety, and some carry weapons for protection. Last September, TJ Mori died after he was stabbed at the housing complex. It is the bloodshed these residents want to stop.
This is my grandma's window, and my grandma used to watch a lot of things happen from the bathroom. My grandma lived a very introverted, private, and type of a secretive life because of the way the neighborhood was. She never wanted to get caught up in drama, and she wanted to be very careful and cautious. But that incident kind of like traumatized my grandma for a while, so that's what led to me also coming back and giving my time to take care of her in her elderly state. She eventually got to the point where she couldn't take care of herself very well, so which is why I'm still here, and I dedicated my time and efforts to live here and take care of my grandmother, and I don't regret a thing. And you know, I love my grandma, I love the neighborhood, I love the people, and you know, my heart goes out. I got nothing but prayers to everybody. A lot of people lost their life here, a lot of people had hard times, a lot of people ended up in jail or on drugs. And you know, the important thing is that everybody in Hawaii knows about it. If you guys don't want issues like this, like homelessness or drugs, then you guys need to go to the top, because it's coming from the top. And the more people are aware of this, the easier it will be for us to eliminate it, and the less it will occur. And so in the future, we could prevent situations like this from happening in Hawaii. One thing that the housing does is they do what they term as federal inspections. And what that means is that periodically and randomly, they invade your house, whether you're home or not. And they used to do this to my grandmother a lot. She was a hoarder because she grew up in the Depression in World War II. So she was always afraid of being evicted and always threatened, and I would have to help clean up her house all the time so that she could pass inspections. But the inspectors they do it about a couple times a year, and they've walked in on me naked in bed. They've walked in on my grandma. They've walked in and then just threw things away without her permission. And they do these inspections under the pretense that they're trying to keep the building clean and up to code and standard. But that is not true, because this unit, like many other units, are actually illegally rented out to the tenants. And when I say that, what I mean is it's not up to building code or standard to rent a lot of these dilapidated units out to people. It's not sanitary. There's lots of roaches, rats, vermin, bed bugs, and deterioration of the pipes, the water, the lights, blackouts, windows, etc., etc. Things don't get fixed. A lot of the maintenance men are rude and incompetent, in my opinion. The ones that I've run into, one time I was laying under my window and a maintenance man from the outside smashed a hammer from the outside. The glass fell onto my bed without warning, without knocking on the door, so that he could replace the window, while smashing the window into my bedroom. Things like that happen all the time, and you know, the staff is not very well paid, not very well experienced, and yet the funding is in the millions of dollars. But the average citizen and the average tenant is not allowed to audit these numbers, so we don't see representation of the millions of dollars, and we don't see how the money is spent or where it goes, which is, like I said, goes back to a lot of embezzlement. And like I said, these units are not in a normal situation in America. You know, ideally, there's a building code and there's regulations and rights and standards and practices that units have to have in order to be rented out to people. But like I said, a lot of these units aren't. Here's just one small example. This wall, while I was showering in the shower, collapsed out. All the tiles fell out off the wall. It was never replaced. And also parts of the shower caved in many times. If my grandmother had been bathing in here and the wall had fell on her while she was in here, she would have been very injured. And there's lots of times where people living here could easily sue and try to find representation, but they haven't because they're just ignorant of the law. And a lot of the time that allows the bad management to boss them around and intimidate them, which should not happen. Even when I went to go check my mail, the mailman wouldn't talk to me or give me my mail because he was afraid of me. This neighborhood has a bad reputation. I had to wait till my paycheck was in the mailbox and then I could open it and then take it out. Everybody treats the people here very badly, and a lot of people like my grandmother just don't deserve it. So I wanted to point that out as proof. Still not fixed, and it probably won't be fixed. And this unit, after my grandmother and I are completely gone from this unit, it will probably never be rented out ever again. And if it is, it'll take a long time to renovate. So like I said, a lot of the windows is a common problem here. I'm just showing you guys some of the common problems. But this is my bathroom window, and I can't open it. It doesn't open. They didn't fix it. They can't fix it. A couple of the jealousies fell out, but as you can see, there's supposed to be like a little lever here that goes up and down, and the lever opens the window and closes the window, but I can't even open or close the window. It's permanently closed, so I can't even get any airflow into the bathroom when I wanted to. But that's just an example. They don't even have, some of these installations are so old, they don't even have the pieces to replace them with. They can't even replace them because they don't even have the proper handle. They can't even make one to fit in there to fix it. So they just figure, yeah, just leave it closed, you know. This is all water damage, mold, and the paint peels off the walls. Everything's rusted, and you have a lot of water damage, water leakage coming through the ceiling, rusted pipes. It's all common. If they really cared about the quality of these units, none of these things would exist. And so keep that in mind, guys. If you live in a situation like this, they're looking for your money, they're looking for your drugs, they're looking for your guns, if you had one. And if you didn't even have any, if they wanted to frame you, they could plant such a thing just to get you evicted. They could look for any excuse they want just to get you evicted, because every unit has something wrong with it. So even if you had a perfect unit, they could plant something, or they could say, oh, hey, look, this is not up to code, we need to get you out. And it's just an excuse to basically do illegal things to people against their civil rights and their standards and their privacies, and just really abusing people. But then they claim that they have ways that you can call and numbers that you can call for grievances, and those are usually dead ends because they all scratch each other's backs. And once the complaint gets to a certain level, they don't do anything about it. So we'll see how well this video helps people or not. But yeah, thank you. So like I said, guys, my grandmother originally moved in here, and did so because, you know, she was a native Hawaiian Chinese woman and a single parent with 5 kids that had very limited housing options. And my grandmother lived here for over 50 years, never bothered anybody, never got arrested, never did drugs, never got into a fight, and raised 5 of her kids here. 3 of those kids are gone, including my mother. Times weren't always easy. Sometimes times got rough, but I was also born and raised here in 1982, and I'm still here. Everyone has left. All my family members have left. My grandmother is no longer here, and soon I will no longer be here either. So I'm making this video to commemorate my grandmother's memory, my mother's memory, and my time here as well. And to anybody that's left here, you know, I encourage you guys to have hope, do your best, stay positive, be aware of your rights, and be aware of the law. And it's important that the rest of Hawaii knows, because Hawaii is based on a tourism industry, and most people picture Hawaii as a vacation spot or a paradise where people just come for beaches and shopping. And most of the tourists and visitors and publications only show Waikiki or the business district or the foods of the restaurants. And neighborhoods like this, which have been around for a very long time with local people, are at the heart of Honolulu. And they are almost voiceless, ignored, invisible, and left behind, but are a direct result of those businesses and tourism industry is what creates neighborhoods like this. So I want the world to know, and the rest of Hawaii to know, that people like my grandmother And my family members and we all deserve just as much respect as anybody else, and the people that live here too, that are just trying to make a living in Honolulu. It's a very expensive, very rough economy. Deserve just as much as respect and recognition as anybody else. And it's a lot of corruption, it's a lot of embezzling, it's a lot of insider criminal activity that's organized, that's going right to the top. But it's the common citizens and the street criminals and the street gangs and the homeless that get the bad rap. No one ever asks where the drugs are coming from, where the money's coming from, and nobody understands the process of gentrification. But it is a $1 million, billion-dollar industry, and it's coming right from the banks and state officials themselves, who are unfortunately sometimes crooked and corrupt. People like our current governor, Ige, has a net worth of $300 million and about $44 million in the bank. And he earns it by allowing places like this to exist. The mayor and the governor, for many years and many different terms, have been accepting money to look the other way and to allow illegal drugs and gun imports through neighborhoods like this. And not all the people in the government are bad, and not everybody's a part of it, but it definitely is something that people need to realize is coming from the people that they trust to uphold the law, and the rights of the people that live here are not always well represented. And the government of Hawaii itself actually gets paid and gets pay raises. The mayor and the governor get pay raises to actually bring in homeless people from other states, such as New York or California. And we actually even export our homeless to Las Vegas. And that's a big industry. So if you are driving around Hawaii and you're upset and you see a homeless person outside your house, you see a homeless person at the gas station, or you see somebody high on methamphetamine, please realize that that was intentional. It's a part of gentrification. It was created by our own state officials, and the police and the social workers are used as cleanup crew by the problems that are created by the government themselves. If you talk to a lot of these homeless people, they're not even from Hawaii. They're from the mainland. And so is the drugs, so are the guns, so is the crime. I did, like I said, represent a part of a class action lawsuit over 10 years ago. We got a very small sum of money, but the millions of dollars of renovations never took place. This apartment itself, for the 50 years that my grandma was here, renovations never took place. And it's sad that my grandmother is going to move on and never see representation or reparation from that. But by making videos like this, I hope that the future will not permit such incidents like that anymore. The management here is a big problem, and people should really speak up against the management. You shouldn't let people who are not from your neighborhood and who are not even local to your state tell you what to do or run you, especially people like the manager that's running this establishment. The manager that runs this establishment was very disrespectful to my grandmother, was very disrespectful to me, is not a local person, was only in charge of the parking situation. In my opinion, is very underqualified, and tried to evict my grandmother when my grandmother was elderly and raising a handicapped son. Tried to evict my grandmother and I. At the time, I was actually helping Mayor Mufi campaign, and in order to not get evicted, I actually had the direct phone number and email to, at the time, Mayor Mufi's office, and I actually called and emailed Mayor Mufi myself, and his office called the management here and said, do not evict my grandmother. So you have to realize that there's good and bad to the government, and the sad thing is that people just don't know how to make the government represent or work for them because the information is not given. But if you call the correct lawyers, you make the correct grievances, the correct people in office, and elect the correct people in office, then you will have more of a chance like I did. I actually was able to get Mayor Mufi to help me from getting evicted, my grandmother from getting evicted. So I want to make it clear to anybody seeing this video that it's not all black and white, and it's a matter of having knowledge and knowing how to use that knowledge. And in closing, I'd just like to dedicate this video to everybody who's ever lived in Mayor Wrights and the future of Mayor Wrights and the future of Hawaii, because places like this with gangs and crime and drugs and guns affects everybody that lives on this island. I was fortunate enough to be born and raised in Hawaii and be local, and I've had a wonderful life here in Hawaii. I've taught at many schools, and I've gotten to be on the news many times. And I have been a member of my community, and I've been given back, and I've received a lot of good things. So I'm going to leave it at that, guys. Thank you for watching this short little documentary. I hope you enjoyed it. And much aloha, peace, love, stay smart, stay strong, don't panic, have faith, and God bless.
Nobody should be mean to each other because of the color of the skin. It's so silly, you know. We're not in a mainland, you know, we're just on a little island.
You're right.
We're supposed to be kind to each other, you know. I don't know how Haole people feel, but, you know, I don't feel that way. I don't think Haoles are better than island people, you know. Most island people are poor, you know, they don't have their own home. Have they had any rights, you know? Just like everything was taken away from them. But we shouldn't think we're better than others, you know? And if we could possibly be nice to each other, we could even telling them hello is enough, you know? We don't have to be invited to the house to eat and everything. To not like somebody because they had darker skin than you, that's ridiculous.